Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're to pull out the key nuggets of knowledge, get you informed fast.
That's the plan.
So today, we're diving into something our sources are calling a silent war.
Mm-hmm.
Not the usual kind, missiles and tanks. This one's fought with currency, technology, trade, ideas even, right across the globe.
It's a fascinating frame for what's happening.
Definitely. And our mission today is to really unpack how the Global South is, well, defying what these sources see as long-standing Western control.
And why now? That's a key part of it, too.
Exactly. Why now? The sources we've looked at, they offer a really unique perspective on this huge geopolitical shift. We're going to try and make sense of it all for you.
Yeah, and maybe first let's clarify that term, Global South. It's not just geography anymore, is it?
No, the sources are quite clear on that.
Right. It used to mean, developing nations, post-colonial states.
Yeah.
But now it's really evolved into more of a geopolitical identity.
An identity, okay.
Yeah. Think about countries like India, Brazil, Indonesia, South Africa. Russia and China, too, hugely different nations.
Definitely different, yeah.
But they're sort of uniting under this common banner, this shared goal.
Which is?
Essentially to break free from what they see as decades of Western, control dictating the terms globally.
Okay, that makes sense. It feels like this has been simmering for ages, though. So the big question from the sources, why is it all bubbling up right now? What's the catalyst?
Well, the core idea coming through from everything we read is pretty stark.
Yeah.
The era of unipolarity, one dominant power, it's dying, or at least it's on its way out. And a new multipolar world is being born.
Multipolar, multiple centers of power.
Exactly. And this transition itself, it's not smooth. Our sources suggest it's actually creating this space, this fertile ground for new regional power plays and strategic shifts that maybe weren't possible, say, 10, 15 years ago.
So old assumptions are out the window.
Pretty much. It's destabilizing things, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, quite a shift. Let's get into the tools then. The tools that, according to our sources, underpinned Western dominance and how the Global South is reacting. First one, the U.S. dollar.
The dollar. Yeah.
Our research really flags this. The world's reserve currency. It controls global trade, finance, debt. It's like the master key, isn't it?
It really is. The key to the global economic engine, you could say. And this is where you see some really concrete defiance happening.
Like what?
Well, BRICS, plus us, they're actively working on creating a new currency just for trade between them.
A BRICS currency.
Yeah. And you've got Russia and China already ditching the dollar in their own trade deals, settling in rubles or yuan.
Right.
India, too, they're experimenting, using the rupee for some oil deals, for instance.
So this isn't just, symbolic?
Oh, no, not according to the sources. They suggest this fundamentally changes how nations view risk globally. Well, if the dollar isn't the only safe haven or the only way to trade everything, nations have to rethink their reserves, their investment strategies. It forces a diversification we haven't really seen on this scale before.
Okay, so they're hedging their bets, basically, building resilience.
Exactly. Looking inward, trying to be less vulnerable to, external financial pressures or shocks tied to one currency system.
That makes sense. And that brings us neatly to another tool, doesn't it? Sanctions. The sources are pretty blunt here. They call them weapons.
They do. And they point to examples we all know. Iran, Venezuela, Russia.
Yeah.
But they also mention India back in 1998 after the nuclear tests.
They
faced sanctions then, too.
Right. But the sources seem to dig deeper than just listing examples.
Yeah.
What's their take on the purpose of these sanctions?
Their argument is pretty strong. It's not really about justice or international law in practice. It's about compliance.
Compliance?
Yeah, punishing countries that won't play by Western rules, as they put it.
But do the sources mention if this approach actually works? Or does it backfire sometimes?
They definitely suggest it can backfire. The idea is that seeing sanctions as, illegitimate or unfairly applied can actually push countries closer together.
Like an unintended consequence.
Exactly. Instead of isolating a country and changing its behavior, you might inadvertently encourage it to join forces with others who feel similarly targeted. Creates a sort of feedback loop, strengthening those alternative blocks.
So it reinforces the divide instead of bridging it. Interesting. And this isn't just about money or economic pressure, is it? There's the whole narrative side.
Absolutely. Media and narrative control.
Our sources point out that for a long time, Western media has largely dominated the global story. And often anyone challenging the system gets labeled, authoritarian, regressive, rogue.
That's the pattern they highlight. And the Global South isn't just, sitting back and taking it. They're actively pushing back against that narrative control. Well, they're not just complaining about bias. They're building their own platforms, promoting different voices, telling their own stories.
Any specific examples?
The sources mention Rumble, actually, as one example of challenging what they term big tech's narrative dominance. It's part of this silent resistance, an assertion that there are other valid viewpoints out there.
Okay, so building alternative channels for information.
Yeah, creating the infrastructure to get those other perspectives heard.
And this pushback, it's coalescing into actual alliances, creating a counterbalance. BRICS Plus comes up again.
It does, and the sources say it's not just an economic club anymore, it's become a political signal.
A signal of what?
Well, with countries like Egypt, the UAE, Iran joining, it's morphing into something bigger. The sources call it a coalition of economic strength and political resistance.
Wow. And what about the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
Similar story there. It started mainly focused on regional security, counterterrorism, that kind of thing. But according to the material we reviewed, it's evolving, becoming more of a deliberate counterbalance to NATO.
A counterbalance to NATO.
Okay.
So, these aren't just acronyms on a page. They represent a real, growing collective will, gaining serious geopolitical weight.
This leads us to another front in this. Silent war. Technology. Information control. You mentioned building alternative platforms, but it goes deeper, right? Building parallel internet ecosystems.
It really does, and it sounds huge, almost impossible.
Yeah. What's the driving force behind that massive effort? Why commit such huge resources?
It boils down to one thing, really. Digital sovereignty.
Digital sovereignty, meaning?
Meaning control. Avoiding the vulnerability that comes from relying entirely on tech infrastructure or platforms that could potentially be, weaponized against them. Think censorship, surveillance, denial of service.
Okay, so it's about security and autonomy.
Precisely. And we see concrete examples in the sources. Russia developing its own internet backup system, just in case.
China, described as having a fully walled-off cyber ecosystem, the Great Firewall, and everything behind it.
And India.
India is deeply involved, too, building its own sovereign data centers, banning foreign apps they see as security risks, and crucially, investing heavily in creating its own domestic tech stack.
In what areas?
Critical areas. AI, semiconductors, defense technology. It's not just about a digital wall. It's like building a whole digital city behind that wall with its own infrastructure.
Fascinating. And within this really complex picture, India's role seems unique. The sources really emphasize this.
They do. It's interesting.
When I first heard Global South, I admit my mind still partly went to, economic development status.
Yeah.
But reframing it as this geopolitical identity changes things. And India doesn't seem to fit neatly into the expected boxes.
No, it doesn't. It's not automatically anti-West, but it's definitely not just following the Western line.
Right. And importantly, not part of that tight China-Russia axis either.
Exactly. India is pursuing what the sources call strategic non-alignment. Or maybe strategic autonomy is a better term now.
How does that play out in practice?
Well, look at the apparent contradictions, which actually makes sense under this model. India engages actively in the Quad with the US, Japan, Australia, security focus there. But at the same time, it's trading with Russia using local currencies, bypassing the dollar.
Okay.
It hosts major SCO and BRICS summits, playing a central role in those non-Western groupings. And as we mentioned, it's building its own weapon systems rather than just buying off the shelf from the West or Russia.
So it's picking and choosing based on its own interests.
That's the core of it. The sources actually quote India's stance quite directly. We will partner, but not submit. We will engage, but on our own terms.
Partner, but not submit. That's a powerful line.
It is, and it reflects this idea of India emerging as a civilizational state, as some put it, finding its own independent voice on the world stage, not dictated by Western norms or, frankly, Eastern coercion either.
So its role is?
The sources nail it, I think. Crucial, complex, calculated. That sums up India's position in this shifting landscape.
What an incredible picture our sources paint. It really moves beyond theory, doesn't it? This is realpolitik playing out.
Absolutely.
A silent war, as they call it, fought over currency, global institutions, tech, trade, ideas. And for maybe the first time in decades, the established Western order is being challenged not with bombs, but with actual viable alternatives.
Yeah, alternatives are the key word, not just opposition, but building parallel systems.
So the next time you, our listener, hear these terms, Global South, multipolarity, strategic autonomy, remember what we've discussed. This isn't just academic jargon.
Not at all. It's the language of the front line in a massive global power shift that's happening right now.
Absolutely.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with, building on all this. Given the rise of these parallel systems, these alliances, these alternative ways of doing things, what does that mean long term? Not just for power dynamics, but for things like global cooperation, for the very meaning of an international order. That's something worth pondering.